Welcome to Assimilating Knowledge, episode 0.1. Today we're going to interview Aldous.
How we doing, man?
Doing good. Sorry, I completely blanked because I was starting to get an echo.
Yeah, no worries.
So I had to pause the stream on another one.
Gotcha.
What's going on, Aldous?
Not much, man. Happy to be here. My name's Aldous. I'm the host of Friday nights at 11:30. I have a show called The Gutter, where my friend JP, also known as Raiden Radio, and I talk about comic books. Specifically, each week we focus on one individual book. And then the only other show that I am on right now, other than that, is Wednesdays. We have a very creative show entitled The Show. And it's more just a variety show that JP and I kind of cover the topics that we find interesting from one week to the next. And then we've been watching the one episode at a time of the 1943 Batman serial, which ties into my own original channel that I really only did pre-recorded content on. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But that was focused on the 1930s, the Shadow radio show. I took the old audio from the radio programs and cleaned it up as best I could, and with digital processing, and then added a kind of intro to it that talks about the episode and some of the history, who's in it, who are some of the voice actors, how they did some of the things, how it connects to some of the other media associated with the Shadow, and that really did well. And that's kind of the rough story of what I'm up to right now. So thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely, man. That's cool. I didn't know you did that with the Shadow. I grew up and basically the only media my dad had was all old serials.
Nice. Yeah, so that's my bread and butter, man. I've got a good friend of mine that he always refers to it. If it happened after 1950, I probably don't have much of an interest in it because pulp magazines, old comics, and radio serials, movie serials. That's my bread and butter, man. I love that stuff.
Right. My Batman, he pulls a Victor torch out of his belt.
There you go.
So how did walk us through, how did you come to being a streamer or YouTuber or whatever it is you call yourself?
Yeah, so I was hanging around. Really, I mean, I was hanging around on YouTube, just listening to a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great channels that do story breakdowns and cover long form video essays on a lot of stuff that I'm really interested in. And one of them that I still love today, it actually was the impetus for the creation of Cobra Kai. And that was a guy that did an analysis of Karate Kid talking about how Johnny was the hero and Ralph Macchio's character was the bad guy. And I love stuff like that. I would dig through YouTube trying to find things like that. And so that's kind of how I was on YouTube already. And then I started listening to some indie comic stuff, joined Twitter, got involved with some indie comic stuff. And in the fall of, and I've been on a couple of shows here and there, but my good friend Jeremy Ice and Fire started a Saturday show in the fall of 2022, I believe it was. And we started doing Saturday shows, and they were 3 to 4 hours long. And we talk with indie comic creators, and we had guests on. We talk about topics and comic book related things. And he started off with only about 400 to 500 subscribers. And by July of the next year, we broke 1,000. And then it was like just everything was taken off. The show was gaining popularity, and it wasn't all us. Jeremy was doing a lot of pre-recorded content on House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones and a couple other TV shows. And his channel really started to blow up to the point that now he's almost at 30,000 subscribers. And we just took a hiatus from that show in December. Wasn't doing that anymore. But still had the itch. So like I said, JP and I, Raiden and I, created the Wednesday show just so we kind of have two things that we could do during the week. One that's kind of just our interests in general, and one that's a little bit more focused.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. I did not know about the being a part of the Jeremy Ice and Fire one.
Yeah, and that was a really good time, man. You just,
I bet.
One of the things, if you're going to do streaming, and I know that's kind of what your whole focus of this was, is to talk about streaming. There's really only two ways to go about it. Or actually, there's three ways, but we'll talk. There's two primaries, and then there's my path, and I don't recommend my path to anybody. Pre-recorded content which is videos that you prep offline and you do your narration and all your edits on, and then you upload them. That's really the ideal way to grow a channel. Live streaming is something that you do to complement that. But at the same time, if you just want to have fun, you can just live stream and you'll build an audience. It's just much slower to engage an audience. That pre-recorded content, even if you take your and a lot of guys do this, they'll do live streams and then they'll edit sections of their live streams out and make pre-recorded content out of their live stream. And that way you're kind of doing the best of both worlds. But there's that, those are kind of the two primary paths. And if you're going to take either one of those, the next big thing after you decide what you're going to do is to pick your topic. Like, what are you going to talk about? And the easiest, best thing to do is to talk about something that A, you're passionate about, and B, you know, or you're willing to do a lot of research on, because you're going to be talking about this. This is what your whole channel is going to be built on. So you got to have passion. If you don't have passion, you're going to get burned out. And the YouTube landscape is littered with the husks of channels where creators have gotten burned out. So those are like the two things. I mean, find something you're really, really passionate about. If you want to talk about Marvel movies, man, talk about Marvel movies, but also understand that's a really popular topic and you're going to be facing a lot of competition. Same thing if you want to talk about Star Wars, right? If you want to be a standout, find something that nobody else is doing, or find an angle that nobody else has taken, right? So like, there's a guy that just kind of exploded out of nowhere that was movies, music, and monsters, right? And he was doing videos on a bunch of old 60s, 70s, 80s sci-fi shows and monster movies and going into the history on them. And like, where is the original Enterprise model? Well, it's over here. And let me tell you a history about that. And let's talk about what happened to Star Trek. Or where was the original mask from the creature from the Black Lagoon? Well, here's where it ended up. It's in this museum and this guy owns it. And here's an interview with him where he's talking about it. But did you know this about the movie? There's people that aren't doing that kind of stuff. At the time, he did it really well. And that's the other thing, is your production value has to be up, right? You got to know what you're doing, at least in how you're going to handle it and how you're going to display things.
Right. Yeah, that's probably going to be a real big learning curve, getting into doing anything more than just talking, you know?
Well, yeah, talking's easy, right? I mean, anybody can fire up a live stream and start talking. And I encourage anybody, it's awesome to do. It's a lot of fun. But like I said, you can get burned out on it. And unless you have a really engaging plan, it's also going to get old for your audience to kind of hear the same spiel over and over again. So make it dynamic. You got to have something spicy that kind of makes it different. And, that can just be, dude, Joe Rogan does really well just for 3 hours of him just talking to a guy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So you can make it engaging. It's just the quality of your guest to a large degree. And then how do you direct that conversation? How do you manage that conversation deftly enough that you're not controlling it, but you're still guiding it down that path that you want to keep on?
Well, one idea that Snuggie suggests. That's some magic school bus thing there.
There you go. Yeah, and what kind of is it? Is it an inguinal hernia? Is that what we're going for now?
I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll get Snuggie on for that one.
I like it. He likes to talk about Power Pack too. The comic series Power Pack was one of his favorites, so make sure you mention that when he comes on.
I will write that down. So I guess my thoughts are, for to just start simple and easy. And like you said, talking is easy. I feel that I am an above average conversationalist. So I think I know for a fact I can make myself and the person I'm talking to entertained. Now, does that translate to the audience? That's where, that's going to be a learning curve.
Yeah, and it is. It's one of those things where the more you do, the more comfortable you'll get. But man, it's public speaking to a large degree. I mean, and it's public speaking in the worst possible way, because you have no idea how many people are in the audience. I mean, you kind of do, because you know how many people are watching it right now and how many people are in your chat, but you have no idea how many people are going to watch this video in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. It could go viral. Millions of people could be listening to your voice. You could say something really dumb and get clipped and get mocked endlessly. It is the absolute worst of all of the negatives, all of those weighty things that people just get, frozen over with public speaking.
Right? The best or worst thing that could happen to you is to end up on Asmongold.
Or I think the worst thing that can happen to you is you end up on something awful, and the train wreck that remains of that burgeoning streaming empire.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of it, right? Like my friend Jay Doyle over on Diabolical Souls Presents, he does primarily live streams, and he has big casts of people. He'll have like 8 people on at a time, and they broke down, like when the new X-Men animated series was on Disney Plus. They were breaking episodes down 1 episode at a time after it aired and talking about it. And man, for the last year and a half over on Jeremy's channel before I took my hiatus, we were talking about From, the MGM Plus show, episode by episode every week. We were talking about that and all the new stuff when the season was coming. What are our anticipations? What do we expect is going to happen? It was a lot of fun, and both those channels have grown. Diabolical Souls Presents is almost over. I think he's over 25,000 subscribers now.
That's
so
awesome.
I mean, those are just some of the 2 of the guys that I know, right? And who the hell am I? And they've built their channels up that way. But again, both of them work exceptionally hard. They do an excellent job of preparing those streams and having guidance, and they're both fantastic conversationalists. They can keep things moving. There's never any dead air.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing, particularly what I'm thinking about doing is having a guest on each week, right? And I think that's going to be difficult, finding your timing and rhythm every single week.
It depends a lot on who you're talking with too. Like Jeremy Snuggy and we were on together for a long time. And man, after you've been streaming with a bunch of guys, I don't know. Here's a great example of it. Did you ever listen to like when you're driving to work and you're listening to a morning show on the radio, and you wonder, like, how can their timing be that good when it's live? That's what you get with that long-term camaraderie of streaming with people. You start learning everybody's vocal idiosyncrasies, and you
Right.
know when to chime in. And then also, when another guy's setting up a bit, and so you know when to shut up. Like, those are the two, the 2 things there that kind of go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. But that's what I'm saying is, if I like in a Joe Rogan style, have a different person on every week, you don't ever build that rapport,
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's where it's not just about being a good conversationalist. I guess it is, but the part of the conversationalist that's the most important is being a good listener and having an ear for when those cues are. When is the pause somebody taking an intake of breath, and when is the pause them stopping? Because if you got to, sometimes you kind of count in your head, like, okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's a little too much dead air, and then you step in. And
Right.
you got to be comfortable with walking over people a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not a good listener. I like talking. That's kind of my thing. So what do you think about that idea as far as starting a channel? Because I agree. Like, I think it would be significantly easier to start something where, like, you have a built-in, I could do an episode of Friends every single week, right?
Yes.
And
and that's a great example of that market is saturated, right?
Right. Yeah, but it's easy because there's already subject matter. All I have to do is get on and talk about it. If anybody is willing to be in the chat, I can, we can talk about their favorite episode of Friends or whatever. But the way I'm thinking about doing it, where I need a guest every week, like, eventually I'll build up like a small group of guys that are just kind of always in the wing and always willing to step in if somebody else doesn't show up, and you see that on late night shows, who am I thinking?
Well, I mean, Carson always had his standard, corral of guests, right? Where,
yes,
you want to pull, man, Don Rickles, you always know Rickles is going to be a hit. And if you've got a musical act that you're not sure about, or another guest you're not sure about, you make sure you cast Rickles and you keep Rickles on the couch. You know,
Right.
Norm Macdonald was that way with Conan. If Conan was going to have somebody on that you didn't, he wasn't sure was able to maintain a conversationalist, strike for that portion of the show, what did he do? He kept Norm on the couch.
Oh,
And
absolutely. That's exactly the one I was looking for. It just slipped my brain. Is Norm. Because I've heard Conan in interviews say, if somebody last minute said, hey, their agent called and said, hey, they're not showing up tonight. He said he could, Norm was one of those guys he could just call and say, hey, I need you in. And I think that over time I can develop those relationships and have those people. But I think in the beginning, it's going to be hard finding people willing to come on a channel with 7 subscribers.
right. And that'll change over time. But I mean, part of it is everybody starts out from somewhere, right? So you're going to have to, everybody, and there's something to be said for the charm of a smaller show, because the audience is much more captivated. Because like right now, we've got Sour Skittles saying hello. Well, hello, Sour Skittles. And Lollipop Gang, new phase for me, Norm on the couch. But the nice part is we can sit over and the chat's not spinning. Right. You go to a channel that's live that has, 12,000 live viewers. You're not reading anything in that chat. It's moving too fast.
I don't know how, well, I do know how they do it. They read the super chats.
Exactly. And that's why at those bigger levels, people do super chat, because then you get, and that's the serotonin effect, right? That's calling into the radio show and getting on the air.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge. It's a serotonin uptake, booster. It's just like getting likes on social media. And that's part of why you see that many people in that chat. Is there's that aspect of, oh, I can get this read by in front of this many people. There's also the entertainment side of it, to be sure, but those two things work hand in hand. Now with a smaller show, you get it's more intimate, so you can spend more time and you can engage with your audience a little bit. I enjoy that aspect much more. And that's why when I took the hiatus from Jeremy's channel, from that massive, having those huge audiences of over 100, 200, 300, 500 people in the chat, I like my little Friday show. I like my little Wednesday show that are so incredibly niche that I know that I'm not going to get more than 20 to 30 viewers. And I'm okay with that. I don't want any more than that, because that's about even that at times is too much to handle when you get the chat really moving and people are commenting, or Kayla gets mad and really starts hammering a point. It gets hard to keep up with it at times. On Wednesday's show this week, we had Will Perdomo on, who's a fantastic writer. He's got a comic book coming out called Meathead. And we were talking to him about that, and I got engaged talking with him, and I ignored the chat for like 15 minutes, and some of the guys in the chat are like, I got this, you didn't read my chat, or I had this great line. And then you're going back, and the line was good, but because I missed it, because I was so focused, I took my eye off the ball.
Absolutely. This chat is not moving. And for me to listen to you and do the chat, I clearly need a producer.
Right. Well, or you can train your brain a little bit too. I mean,
right.
I always think of it this way. The back in the Apollo program, they didn't have separate channels for everybody on the headsets. So you had navigation, you had atmospheric, you had life support, you had trajectory, you had engines, you had diagnostics. They're all talking on one channel. And the guy that's listening to all of that was able to, in his brain, filter out and pick out just that voice that he needed the information from right now in this cacophony of voices that's going on. You kind of got to train yourself to do that.
Oh, yeah.
That you're running the show, so you got all your media files and everything that you're getting ready to throw up. You're prepping your next answer or your next question for your guest while you're listening to what their answer was on the previous question, because you might have something they say might key into a sub question off of that, while at the same time you're watching the chat and you've got 2 or 3 chats that you're ready to pull up anytime you get a chance to. So it can get a little complicated.
Oh yeah. Like I said, nothing's moving and I'm already confused.
Yeah, but like Snuggie said, man, you do get used to it. After a while, it does become a little bit of a well-oiled machine, and you start kind of knowing like what the flow is, and again, what the tendency is. The more people you interview, you get an idea of how people answer questions.
Right.
And really, one of the best ways to do that is watch other people interview and then listen to how people answer and how they follow up. And then you don't have to replicate that, but think, how would you handle that? How would you handle that question? And then how would you rephrase it or restructure it so you could get an answer or get more detail out of it?
Yes, I completely understand that. So let's go back to where you were saying that you like the more, this, you know, the smaller show, smaller chat, makes it more intimate. I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying that it's an intimate chat with Snuggie in there.
Snug's
I mean, am I
Snug's is a
wrong
good
on
friend,
this?
man. I don't think there are too many people, and it's the other weird thing, right? Like, I call him a friend. I've never met him in real life. We were on the same show for over 3 years together. I've known him for about 4 online. Never met him, never even seen his face, but I call him a friend. Now, is he really a friend or is he an online friend? Well, we did a project together because we had a running gag on our show about people would be talking about their comic books, and Snugs and I would always talk about bookmarks. Bookmarks or stickers. What are you gonna? Well, we did a bookmark campaign, and we got a bunch of great artists to do the camp. Snuggie ran it. I helped him out on it, and he did all the hard work. I just kind of sat in the side and took some accolades. But he ran a great bookmark campaign. And so, I mean, I've done business with the guy. I was like, hey, man, if we don't if we don't hit the funding goal, I'll help. I'll kick in some money and we'll make sure we get this done. And so I've even done business with the guy. And, you know, I think we about broke even. I think Snugs might have made a couple hundred off of it. It wasn't anything that the bank broke on.
Right.
But it was one of those things where is he a friend? And that's the other thing. It gets weird because you've known that I've known Snugs for so long. I consider him a friend, but he's not really a friend. You know what I mean? It's not a real life friend. So you get this, that's kind of a strange situation to get into. And it's always a good reality check to keep in mind that, you know, yeah, they're a friend, but they're an online friend. And that's not, as much as that bond may be there. I've never broken bread with the man. I've never had a beer.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously.
Snuggie will be virtually meeting me in the alley after the show. Where's my money?
Snuggie has not forgotten you. Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic because, you know, I've been almost exclusively consuming YouTube for probably about 5 years. But I've only recently like gotten into live streaming and you know, kind of dabbling in chats and stuff like that. But that's a whole different world. Like, you have all these online communities, and you know, to be honest, the last time I had any experience with that would have been like, you know, Yahoo chat,
Yeah, like
you know,
Usenet,
or
right?
Merc.
Or the local BBC.
Yes.
Or BBS, not BBC, BBS, the old BBS networks.
Yeah, and like, you know, I've known people that did a lot more online gaming and stuff, and
Right. Everybody
they,
under 30 has no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about a BBS.
yeah, no, they
People used
don't.
to set up servers in their home with a phone line, and you dial into their server and then post on a message board or play like a text-based game, and then you'd log off with your modem, and then somebody else could log in.
Yes, that's the good old days, right?
It was, man.
That is crazy.
I want to play
Yes.
some global thermonuclear war.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's just crazy that we live in this time where it's like you said, it's almost like before we had, you know, work friends and then real friends. And now we have this whole other category that's similar to the work friends, because you know how it is with your work friends. You go to get another job and you lose most of them because you were never really friends.
Right.
You were friends situationally, and then but online you join in these communities or you build these communities, and it's a really strange thing when you grew up without computers, you know?
No, for sure. I mean, I don't know how to relate sometimes with like my kids with the way they're taught. You know, like all they do, like, oh, they get home and they'll hop on and talk with their friends. It's like, what, you were just at school. Like, why didn't you just hang out at school and talk in person like we used to? Like, why you're rushing home so you can talk to? Like, I don't get that. It's a disconnect.
Oh no, it's I remember when some of the older kids like, why aren't you going out on Friday? And it's like, oh well, because I'm hanging out with my friends online. And it's like, interesting.
Right.
Why don't you go to their house?
Exactly.
And to them that was just kind of a, why would I leave my room? I like my room, you know?
Well, there's a certain safety factor in that, right? Because then you're not putting yourself out there. You know,
Absolutely.
and
And
I
but
think
for us, the safety thing was, if we don't leave, we might get in trouble.
right. Well, there's also if you're not there, you're gonna miss something, and there is no
Right.
digital camera, there is no social media. So if you miss it, man, not only weren't you there, but now you're behind on the story and you didn't see it, so you missed out on that moment. Um, you know, I played hockey in high school, so there were a couple weekends where like I'd be at a travel game, and all the guys would be tubing on the lake, and oh man, Justin got thrown off the tube and smacked into Jerry, and Jerry's knee busted Justin right in the eye, and he had to go to the ER. It was so awesome, and you're like, fuck, I missed that. Like I missed seeing my buddy get totally janked. Like it was because I was at a hockey game. What do I remember from the hockey game? Hockey. I missed that one cool moment. And it's like, oh, but
Yes.
now with digital pictures and cameras and cell phones, I could have just watched the video. It doesn't matter.
Well, now you missed it in the sense that you didn't see it immediately.
Right, which has no bearing almost. There doesn't seem to
Right.
be a in the moment anymore.
No, that's when you watch uh, uh, like a live recording of an event, you see everyone there watching it through their phones as they're recording it, and you're like, are you even really there? If you're standing in the crowd watching your phone as you record the people on the stage, like, how do you even feel like you're there? I don't understand that.
Right, and here's a great example of that. My son and I were at a hockey game last night, and it was tied 1-1 going into the third. The home team that we're rooting for got a power play, and they ended up scoring the game-winning goal with like 90 seconds left. And we're excited, we're cheering, and after they score the goal, I look down, and the people like 3 rows in front of me had their phones out, and they were, after the goal had been scored, they were rewatching it on their phone.
Oh
And it's
wow.
like that's like real-time replay in your hand. It was something I'd never thought of before, but it was like, man, that's so surreal that I grew up in an era where you didn't take your eyes off a sporting event for a minute because you were terrified you'd miss something. And now you don't have to because it's on the jumbotron and then it's in your hand. Like it's wild to me. But I also think there's other than the obvious negatives to all that we've kind of covered, the other negative to all of that is the social interaction negativity. And that's like what you were talking about, being a good conversationalist, having the ability to talk face to face. Now we're both rocking our avatars, and that's
Right.
fine. But there's something also to be able to look at somebody's face and see them as they communicate in person in meet space, right? That's almost being lost. And I see that in my career with people that are in their early 20s, that there's definitely a disconnect on interpersonal communication. They won't make eye contact with you. They get kind of shifty, and it's a little strange. It's something you have to break some of them up and like actually bring to their attention. Like, dude, you look at somebody when you're talking to them. Like, don't look away. Don't look at the ground. It's a little strange, but who would have thought you're having to do that in a professional environment? But you do.
Well, the crazy part is when you're interacting with someone like that, and then you see them go off in the corner to record a little Instagram stream or something, and you just see them completely become this new person on the camera.
Right.
And you're
Well,
like, why
that's
don't
the
you
other
just
thing,
why
right?
don't
I
you
mean,
do that in real life? Or
well,
I'm
that's
sorry,
the
why
other
don't you
thing.
do that IRL?
When you're on this, when you're streaming, you can be anybody. I'm all this, man. That's not my real name. That's my moniker, right? That's what I use to shield. And that's the other, dude, we can get into this in a minute, but you have a persona. Now I don't have a persona. This is me. I'm just as much of an asshole online as I am in real life.
Right.
But the difference is you do have people that wear that mask. and they wear that mask whether they're showing their face or not. And you see this all the time, just with celebrities who have like talk shows
You
that
see them become
they
the
seem,
mask.
yeah, they're the nicest person in the world on their talk show, and then you find out like behind the scenes they're an absolute holy terror.
I believe that. I believe that.
I love Snugs, man.
No, Snugs is he's my only real friend on X.
There you go. You could do worse. You could do worse. Snugs are good people. But
I could be hanging out with the Lollipop gang,
there you go.
texting each other in the same room.
Ain't that the truth? Meghan Markle's new podcast. So excited. No, and that's the other thing is I've talked to a lot of people that they'll start their channels and they'll have a good product. They'll have something that's entertaining and they'll put on a good show, and then they get so despondent because they've been doing it for a year and they've only got say 400 subs, and then they see somebody like Meghan Markle who is like a black hole of talent, and she's getting $20 million deals from Spot or however big that deal was from Spotify. And it's like, that's just it. And then she produces something that has no viewers, but she still rakes in the cash. And it's like that's people get really bummed out by that. And it really breaks your spirit because you're putting in such hard work and then nobody appreciates it. But that goes back to, you've got two things going for you. If you're passionate about something, it comes across immediately in how you speak about something in your voice. Or again, it can be that mask. It can be somebody that's so good, such a good salesman that they're presenting a passion and they could give two shits about it, but they know it's a topic that they're going to get resonance on.
Absolutely.
And so
that's
there
the
are
people
those
that do all the people that jump on a fresh topic or anything that's hot and they throw it out there. I mean, I don't know how they do it. To me, I don't want to throw myself out there in the sense of like, I don't know. To me, that's drama farming almost. It's not drama farming, but it's clickbait. And you always have to be talking about stuff that, frankly, Margaret, I don't care about.
Right. And that's the thing, right? I'm old enough to remember when YouTube was kind of fresh. And most of the content was actually pretty good. People were putting out good content that had informative things that were different takes.
Right.
Now you get a lot. You'll get within 48 hours of a movie being released, you're going to have 10,000 videos, all of which are going to be mostly the same content. And some of them are the same content because they're reading a script, because this avenue is now here. It is it's a place where people go to. So of course, advertising is going to exploit that. And if I can present myself as an independent voice, but underneath the table, I'm accepting a check so that I can promote something, well, that's going to happen. And you have to be aware of that.
Yeah. And Snuggie is right. That is absolutely one of the ways I've heard so many people talk about, trying to ride that algorithm and get the views. And that's something where I don't know what the future for me or this channel will be. If I ever make it to a large number of people, and I probably said some words I shouldn't have and went viral. That's my thoughts, because I just don't see myself being all that topical. I just want to talk to people about whatever it is they bring to the table. Because for me, I love learning things. I love, taking, like to bring you on and talk about comic books, where I can learn so much from you in just a short period of time.
No, for sure. And that's why I do the gutter, because again, that goes back to the passion thing, right? So all we talk about, we don't just talk about good books. And I think that's something that my audience really enjoys is we'll do some dogs, man, some absolute garbage books that
Stuff
are
from
just
the 90s.
not all of them, but there are some that are just so bad that you can't not talk about them. And it's fun because they are so bad. And so you've got that, but then you've also got some really, really wonderful books that are out there that, and here's the great part about a comic is a comic, you don't have to read a 300-page book that I can talk to you. I could talk to you all day about like Isaac Asimov, right? And the
Right.
Foundation series and how great they are. But if you're not a reader, that's kind of a daunting thing because now you're talking about, well, you've got to read like 12 books that are all a couple hundred pages. And it just seems like a lot. If I'm just talking about a graphic novel that you can get for $15 at Barnes and Noble or order online from Amazon, it's just $15 and it's 60 pages. And I'm telling you, it's worth your time. This is worth it. Babysitter's Club is a great example. Their graphic novels that are out right now are fantastic. They're great for kids to like learn to read, and that's the cool part about what has become like the young adult kids side of graphic novels is there are so many more kids now reading than ever read before. Now there's a downside to that they're reading more graphic novels instead of drifting into literature.
Right.
But I'll take people reading anything over nothing. So it's baby steps. And I think
Oh,
literacy is so incredibly important, especially in an age where, and I don't know about you, man, but like when I grew up, it was drilled into me like you read Shakespeare and you were expected to, if somebody made a biblical allegory, if somebody made a Shakespearean allegory, you needed to pick up on that, and that was important. And if you missed it, it was like, oh, like I should have got. I need to be more mindful of that and pay more attention. And then
yes.
those things we're losing those things. And one of the things I used to talk about frequently was the cultural gap that is being created by we used to use that. You used to use literature references and literature allegories in language so that, and they were universal, everybody understood them. Now we have gotten to the point where like if I make a joke, if somebody's doing something stupid and I go, Ziggy, 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 you've been a bad monkey, the line from Ghostbusters 2, you now have multiple barriers. You have to have seen Ghostbusters 2.
Right.
You have to have seen it enough to know why I'm referencing that for the application of the situation. And then you have to understand the social context. And that's 3 different layers that never used to exist. It used to just
Well,
be one ubiquitous layer.
and that cultural rift has, I mean, it's beyond belief at this point in time, because if you go back, you know, we could have grown up on opposite sides of the country, but we watched MTV.
Exactly.
We watched the same movies. We
There
listened
was a
to the
there
same
was a
music.
cultural baseline. And there's no
Yes.
cultural base. In fact, I think it was Kid Rock was talking about this, that the most amazing thing about the halftime show this year with Kendrick Lamar doing the halftime show was that it only spoke to a very, very small demographic. And it's
Yes.
slowly been drifting that way, but this was the first one where like I'd never even heard any of his music. At least with Katy Perry, and I've heard something on the radio at some point. I was walking into a store, I got into my car, it was on there. Something I've heard, it was recognizable. This was the first time that nothing was recognizable, and that's not a bad thing. It's just they've gone, they understand their audience, and they're going for that audience, and so you get that the cultural baseline has now been broken. And Kid Rock was talking about that's a good thing because they're being so upfront about it now, whereas they used to try to hide it. And I
Right.
think there's a lot of truth in that, and as long as you recognize it for what it is.
Yeah, and as long as everybody understands, it's no different than I don't know if they still do it because I haven't heard about it in a few years, but didn't YouTube like do a YouTube celebration every year and talk about who's the best streamer at this or whatever?
They might. I don't know. I don't really keep up on that kind of stuff. I'm very anti-pop culture. So
Well, I just found it interesting that every year when you would look at that, you would find these channels with 5 million viewers, 20 million viewers, and you're like, never heard of them.
yep. No, it's amazing. I mean, we live in a country that has over 300 million people. And if you think about it, like, man, how many, I can't even remember how many people watched the last episode of MASH, which the whole time I was growing up was like everybody, right?
I
And
know
now
one person.
you've got YouTube people, you've got YouTube channels that have more subscribers than watched the last episode of MASH live. It's amazing to me when you think about it in context of social dynamics.
Pretty sure Lollipop Gang did.
So there's that it's not just there's no cultural baseline anymore. It's everything is fractured. And then with the way we consume media has totally changed. Not to bore, I think we're already probably boring everybody, but if you look at the context of how we consume media, you used to, if you didn't catch it, if you missed the last episode of Seinfeld when it aired, you weren't watching it again unless you knew somebody that recorded it on VHS, right? There was no DVR.
Right.
Now we live in a world where you don't have to watch Saturday Night Live. You can just see the best clips of it Saturday or Sunday morning.
No, and that's the thing. Like I was telling you, I took me a long time to get into live streams, and that's because, and it's not that I didn't watch them, it's just I watched them when it was suitable for me, not when they came on. You know what I'm saying? So no different than, if you look at your viewer count on the gutter and then look at the video that you posted views, there's a big disparity there between people that just couldn't tune in at that time as opposed to people that were just going to watch it on Saturday.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's the difference between a live stream and a pre-recorded video. Because a pre-recorded video, there's no impetuous on a pre-recorded video for when you watch it, right? It's evergreen. I can watch, and I could upload a pre-record right now that's on a random topic. Let's say Apollo 13. What happened on Apollo 13? And that is going to be just as evergreen as long as no new information comes out today as it will be in 10 years. But if I do a live stream where I talk and interact with the chat, well, if I'm listening to that 2 years later, I don't care about that. That's in that moment.
And I think that's those people, the channels that do the pop culture, man, if you didn't listen to last week's live stream within a couple days, it's too old. It's not fun. I've already heard all of the things they're going to talk about.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, if you don't, and this is the danger of live streams too, within the context of how live streams work, you get inside jokes that happen just by their nature, right?
Right.
Remember when we did that? Ha ha ha! 4 episodes ago. If you missed that episode, you're now out. You're on that exclusionary group.
Oh, it's amazing when you watch the lore that some of these channels built over the years and the inside jokes. It's amazing.
So like on the gutter, JP made a comment about big meat one time. If you weren't there for that episode or you've never seen that episode, every time we laugh about big meat, you're not going to get it. And that's the hazard of a live stream versus pre-record content. Because again, evergreen versus non-evergreen. You don't have there's no association. Everything's fresh.
Right. Snuggy's been riding the callbacks for years. Yeah, that is a bad thing and a good thing. So the way I view it is, one, I don't have the skills to do at this point in time. I do not have the skills to do any editing. And therefore, the barrier for entry for me is the amount of time it would take me to make a pre-done product that I felt comfortable with. It would probably just never happen. Whereas with a live stream, you do it, it's out there. You can clip it if you want, and you can clip it into shorter segments. You could do shorts if you wanted. And all of that has its place as far as I'm aware, as far as like building you up in the algorithm and doing all that. Or you can just stream it, you have fun, people watch it, and it is what it is.
No, absolutely. And if you look at I think going back, it really depends on what's the focus of it, what's the content of it, and how deep do you want to go into something, right? So like for my channel, when I was doing the shadow uploads, I would write number one, I mean, I've heard these I'm a huge Shadow fan, so I've heard all these radio programs hundreds of times. It goes back from when I was a kid working in the barn on the farm with my grandpa, and he'd have an AM radio on, and we'd be listening to Tigers baseball games. Or if it wasn't baseball season, or if there wasn't a game on, they'd be playing reruns of, The Shadow or Suspense or any of those other great radio programs. So I had that love built in for me to this program as a kid. And then I listen to them while I'm on long drives because I love them so much that, again, it's that passion. And so then when I go to do them, like, I really don't even I have to do a little bit of research on, like, oh, who was that voice actor? Oh, Richard Whitmark was in this episode as a young man. He's 23. And, oh, this is the episode where the girl that, was the main actress. She got sick and had to be hospitalized. So they brought in this other actress, and oh man, she actually left radio because, again, this is the 30s. Hollywood's really starting to boom. She was on like 3 episodes of The Shadow, and then she became this actress, and you know her from this movie, this movie, and this movie because she went into film and then television. And so there's these great connections. So I could burn through an intro and write it up, but then comes the recording part, right? So then I would have to sit there with my headset, and I started off at my dining room table, and I ended up going, like, my audio just didn't sound right. So now I'm doing all my recording in the bathroom because it had better reverb. And at a certain point, you just kind of look in the mirror and go, like, what the hell am I doing? And you just go back to the dining room table. And you learn how to audio edit and how to filter things out and how to make that monologue that's maybe only 2 paragraphs long sound good. And you force yourself to do it because it's just so much easier doing it in one take at the dining room table and then cleaning it up rather than doing 5 takes in the bathroom and not cleaning it up.
Dude, when I heard, Snuggy told me to go check out The Gutter, and when that came on and I heard your intro, I was blown away because, to me, I was absolutely listening to the best intro of a black and white era product.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I take a lot of pride, and that's why my stuff is so niche on niche on niche that I'm very comfortable with where I'm at. Because, again, I know I'm not going to garner that many viewers. I don't want that many viewers. I want to keep it small. And if I want it, if we could use the parts all this. If I wanted to take off, I can do it. I understand how the algorithm works from being on Jeremy's show, from watching Diabolical Souls take off. I did it at my own channel with The Shadow. I got up to 1,000 subs, and it just gets to a point where it's like, that's not what I wanted. And it sounds so weird to so many people that are striving for subs, because a lot of people view YouTube as easy money. Right. And I don't view it that way. I view this as fun. This is fun. Like, I used to play hockey, man. I'm used to dumping tons of money on, equipment. Like, it's not a big deal. I've got a barn full of woodworking equipment that, I'll make a chair or something. Or we just finished, my son's in Cub Scouts. We just finished Pinewood Derby. And, little things like that. Oh man, they're great and fun. And those are hobbies too. This is a hobby just like anything else. And that's how I treat it. And the minute it's not fun anymore, I walk away because it's not a business. And it's way too volatile to be a business. And what you would have to do to remain constant in it, bothers me for what you'd have to do as a person and what you'd have to, like. I think you kind of have to sell a little bit of your soul to succeed.
Well, so a lot of the channels that I kind of watch and keep up with, man, they are constant. They are making videos like 2-3 a week, plus doing like 4 to 5 different live streams on various different channels. And the whole day they're posting on X, probably Facebook, who knows? But like, that grind is from when they wake up to when they go to bed, and there's no breaks on the weekend.
Right. Well, it's your job, right? I mean,
but it becomes more than that when you are chasing that algorithm, when you're trying, because any step you take, like if you stop to catch your breath, you just lost a mile. Like,
if you're doing the immediately relevant content that's pop culture related, absolutely.
Right.
I worked for a megacorp, man. I don't think there's any difference in that from what I was doing when I was in the quote unquote corporate rat race.
That's
It
true.
it's the same thing. It's 24/7 and you're always working to get noticed. You're always working to do that extra mile so that you get the bump, so you go to the next level so that you can do twice that to get to the next level. And it gets to a point where you wake up and you go, man, is this really what I want?
Yeah, I did that for about a decade.
Same here. And then I
And
left.
then I noped out. I said, you know what? No, like this is because like you said, you get to this point where you realize the reason I'm not moving ahead is because I have a soul.
Exactly. Mine was I traveled for a living, so I traveled all over the place. And I remember I was walking through Atlanta airport, and I sat down at the bar in the F concourse, and the bartender walked over and said my name and said the usual.
Oh,
And I'm like, oh my God, like this is a problem. And immediately what flashed through my head was the moment in Fight Club when he talks about if you travel to enough different places, can you become a different person? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm becoming a different I'm a different person on the road than I am when I'm home. And
so
I don't
YouTube is
like,
kind of your fight club then, really?
yeah, to a large degree, I think it's a lot of people's Fight Club. It's where it's where you can vent. A lot of people are angry and they build up that anger inside them. They have no vent. They don't
Right.
have I don't know, I'm going to get religious for a minute. They don't have a relationship with God and they don't understand how to cope with life. And so they use YouTube as a visceral, you know, outpouring of that aggression, of that hostility that's built up, which is really easy to do in modern society because everywhere you look, there are merchants that are preying on that and building it up because they want you angry because angry fans are great. If you can
Right.
mobilize angry fans, you're going to do really well in social media because that's a lot. It's all drama. It's all the rawest emotions, right? So affection, that's what OnlyFans preys on, is loneliness and affection. And so if you're lonely, then they're going to give you an ounce of their time and then you build an association. Anger is the same way. If you're an angry person, then you're going to search out voices that exasperate that anger. And the same thing's true if you're looking for belonging, which is the most dangerous of all of them. If you're looking for, you know, a sense of being or a motivating factor to an impetuous to justify, that's the worst. But I'll say this, like for all I'm not a believer in the culture war, in the sense of how it's utilized within media. I
Right.
am a believer that there is a culture war, and that's been going on since the communists were infiltrating American institutions in the 30s. And
Right.
that does happen. That is a fact. But if you want to defeat that, the easiest way to do it is to go out, find a good woman if you're a man, or if you're a woman, find a good man, get married, have tons of kids, have so many goddamn kids you don't know what to do with them all, and to raise them all with the strong moral fabric that matches your own ethos and ethics. And if you do that, it's the culture war is a war. You don't win it on a 20-minute YouTube that was recorded in your basement. You win it generationally, and you do it by outbreeding the opposition.
Nope,
But
that
that
is a
doesn't make
fact.
money. So
No, it doesn't. And you know, to go back to your point of, you know, the rage baiting, there's heat. You just don't want go home heat. You know,
yep.
and that's a line. But no, you see, man, it's so interesting when you watch these different the way that different channels manage and handle and build their their chats. Really, it's because you know some of them like they have gamified the system with super chats. Then you go to some where they have twice as many people in the chat and they can't get $1 super chat. And I find all of that so amazing. And I've been not studying it, but I've been paying attention for a few years, like the different ways people do things and just the psychological effects. And I find that stuff to be fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. The live stream side of things is much more interesting than the pre-record. I tend to like the pre-record guys a lot better, which is ironic, I suppose, because I mostly do live streaming myself. But like one of my
Well, I
current
think that there's the art.
yeah, well, one of my current favorite channels, it's a very smart gentleman, feral historian. and he'll pick like one piece of media, and do like a 20-minute video on it. And he's got 50,000 subscribers, but he'll do just one video that's like 15 to 20 minutes long, and he's just talking about that one piece of media, just that one thing. But it's a very erudite, very sharp discourse, and
Right.
it's a pre-record, and that's it. And then yeah, he responds to comments and stuff, but he does pretty well. I mean, his videos get like 10k to 20 views, but they're vastly interesting. I mean, Toy Galaxy is another one. What he does is fantastic, where he picks old toy properties and old cartoons and tells you the history of them. I find those absolutely fascinating. It's really good content to me, because to me they're like mini documentaries. And I think
Yes.
that's where so many of the great channels, which get lost in the sea of rage bait, clickbait, emotion bait, God, and don't even get into any of the political shit. But you've got a whole bunch of people that are mining entertainment, and it's a question of what's the quality of that. How deep does that mine go, or how shallow does it go? And I tend to like the
Yeah.
guys that kind of drive the deep shaft down and see how deep they can get into something, and then really bring up and intersperse it with some philosophical concepts and
You're
strip
just
away things
giving
and go.
Snuggie all kind of ammunition down there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm anticipating him to be clipping this.
Yes, I agree. But man, sometimes you get caught up in that in those rage videos, because they throw those at the beginning of the algorithm.
Oh, for sure, because that's what YouTube makes their money off of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, are you familiar with Down the Rabbit Hole at all? His channel?
No, I'm not.
He does some great stuff. Again, pre-records, but like that was the first time I'd ever heard of the Mouse Utopia experiments. And listening to him talk about those, I was like, oh my God, like how have I never heard this before? The Ash conformity principle. I was vaguely familiar with it, but I never really understood the study behind it until I went to YouTube. And then a guy has a 30-minute video that talks all about the Ash conformity principle and where it came from. And it's wild to me. And that's if you're not familiar with it, Jordan Peterson actually references it a lot with the super agreeable, super disagreeable concept. And it's
Right.
authority's control over you. So like most people are adaptable by authority, most women even more so than men, because men have a lower agreeability than women have. Women have a higher agreeability. But it gets into the percentage. There's always going to be women that will, if you tell them to do something, will ask you why, or will say no if they know that there's a dangerous ramification to their action. Men, it's higher, but that's what Ash was studying, and it's incredible when you listen to it in a well put together documentary. And I wish I could remember the guy that did it, but it was absolutely interesting.
Thanks for being a statistic there, Lollipop Gang. Oh yeah, no, all of that stuff is so fascinating, and you're right. On YouTube, you can find 100 videos to explain all the things to you, but sometimes it's just finding the thing, like what is the new thing that I need to learn about? And there's so many of them, and I don't know that our brains are really capable of the amount of information that I can pump into it every single day.
No, and that's the danger, right? I mean, you can get caught up, and there used to be a man in the early 2000s. We talk about going down a Wikipedia hole where you just get locked in and start circling into Wikipedia topics and go from topic to topic to topic. And next thing you know, you look at the clock, it's been 3 hours. Now you can do that easily on YouTube, which at times can be fantastic, man. It has made raking my yard of leaves in the fall absolutely amazing, because it's not a monotonous task anymore. I can put headphones in and listen to something. My wife can put headphones in and listen. We could be listening to two totally different podcasts or two totally different documentaries. And man, it seems like the work gets done in half the time.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you're painting or something,
Any monotonous
anything.
task, yeah.
You throw I almost exclusively walk around now with one earbud in. And it's playing something just to dull the noise of whatever boring thing that I'm doing at the time.
Oh, for sure, man. And then there's so much. I mean, as we're in 2025, man, there is so much great material via literature and radio and film that is in the public domain, and there are so the incredible creativity of what people do with the public domain material on YouTube. If you dig a little bit, you can find it, and there's some awesome content where people have taken old old Robert E. Howard Conan books, and they've done brilliant audio plays off of them that are just absolutely amazing listens. And you should read them already because it's amazing fiction. And that's the thing about pulp magazines is there was so many pulp magazines all across different genres that there are so many great stories that came out of them. And there's a lot of them are in the public domain, and a lot of people use that as content. And man, it's good content because if you do it right, those stories are so engaging they captivate you. A lot of HP Lovecraft stuff is all freeform up. People do audio readings all the time of it, and if you're not a book reader but you want to listen to some really good stuff, there's tons of options for audiobooks. It's not all
We
it's not all audio videos. Treat YouTube as if it's the radio.
Oh yeah, we lose power often, and so I always have one or two audiobooks, YouTube, downloaded, so that I've just got 50, 60 hours of something to listen to, and yes, a lot of Lovecraft in there.
Yeah, I'll one of the cool things too about YouTube, once you have your own personal channel, is you can upload anything you want. And as long as it's not public, you'll never get DMCA'd, copyright struck. So like I'll
Oh,
go to the local libraries, and when they're cleaning out their audiobooks, I might pick up 5 or 6 audiobooks and then I'll rip them so they're online. And then I always have access via my phone as long as the network doesn't go down, but I still own the physical media, right?
so you just keep that on private then?
Yeah, so I'll just keep them on private, and then I'll have 5 or 6
Oh,
audiobooks in my private, playlist, and be able to listen to those whenever I want.
wow. Life hack there, huh?
It works for me. It might not work for you, but
That's a good one. So here's a super basic thing, but I don't know the answer. What is the difference between being a live streamer and a podcaster?
well, live streams are usually it's a YouTube term, at least how I associate it with it. So I mean, you've got just YouTube, right? But then you've got podcasting, and there's multiple sites that hold podcasts. If you want to, you can take your YouTube live stream as soon as you're done and upload it to a website where you host it on Spotify, or you host it on whatever Apple's podcast series is, and then people can listen to it there. And there's tons of people that do that too. Usually, if unless you're getting a lot of viewers, you have to pay a little bit,
Right.
which is where YouTube is different than those because YouTube's free forum access for the most part. If you're going to use StreamYards or OBS, there are free options that you can do to access and stream. Whereas a lot of those podcast sites, you have to upload your content.
Yeah. Okay. So theoretically, we could call this what we did tonight a podcast, and we are not wrong.
No, it's still a podcast. It's because people can still listen
Okay.
to it, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of an archaic term. It's
Right.
from the iPod days of when you would listen to radio programs on your iPod, and it was a podcast.
Oh, Snuggie said you're wrong, or I'm wrong. One of us is wrong, apparently.
Well,
Okay.
Snuggie's a wonderful contrarian and a good friend, like I said. So.
So with now let's get into your thoughts on how you said right now you are a character, or at least to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be just for anonymity. Even if you're using your real name, you're still presenting something that you're not, right?
Right.
I don't think anybody is their true self, because you always have your wall up, right?
Yes.
Nobody's always themselves in any public situation. You're always presenting an image of yourself. I think the only people that truly know you are your family, right? Because they're around you all the time. So you do have a natural wall. I just think it gets exasperated when you go online, especially if you hide behind an avatar like I do, because the minute you're doing that, there's no direct association, right, to what you have to say. You have a little bit of anonymity, and unless you have a large personal character or some morality to yourself, you can get really mean and get away with it. And that's in my opinion, that's humanity's basis level, right? You're going to be
Right.
cruel to
Yes.
anybody that disagrees with you, and you're going to shout down opinions, because that's the other thing. As soon as you don't have a face that's associated with something, now I don't actually have to listen to you. I don't have to hear what you have to say, because it has no bearing on who I actually am. It's online.
But how much harder is it to find success in this realm hiding behind an avatar? Do you think that handicaps you?
To a degree, just because it's one extra barrier in the human connection, and people want a human connection.
Right.
Um, that's why, like, I don't know if you ever, and you grew up, you're about my age, so at least from our discourse, I'm gathering that. Did you ever have that where there was a DJ or somebody on the radio that when you finally saw him, you're like, that doesn't fit with what I
Yes.
expected, and
Yes.
it's like a letdown. It's the same thing, right? There's no barrier to that online. Or it's the same barrier. The barrier is different in the sense that if a radio program, a terrestrial radio program, I'm locked into my local. I've only got so many selections. Now I have infinite selections. I can go anywhere. So any hurdle that you're going to give your audience to not like you is always going to be a bad thing, because they've got infinite choice, which is a good thing for the market, but you have to keep that in mind. So it's about image presentation, and it's about to a large degree also it's about making your avatar represent your brand, right?
You're right. Yes. Yeah, because there's some avatars I look at and I'm like, huh, who are you marketing to?
Right. No, for sure. I mean, mine sums it up pretty clear. I've got the old microphone because I love old radio. I've got the A and the all this needs to be the radio tower, because again, that ties in with I view this as radio. And then the 3D glasses are, dude, that's about how serious I take everything.
And I think that's beautiful. And it's funny you said radio, because I was talking to my lady friend the other day, and the way I kind of look at like what you and I are doing right now, and we got a couple people watching, like it's to me, it's almost reminiscent of the ham radio guys.
No, for sure. There's a huge amateur radio aspect of this.
Right, where there's just a handful of people talking. There's not a ton. The difference is that theoretically we could have a million people watching, and then we record it, and then whereas the ham radio guys, it was gone. But like, to me, that's what this is, or that's the fun part of it, at least the start of this, is just hanging out with quite literally random people, and finding the connections.
Oh, exactly. And the nice part about removing that human barrier is you lose the interpersonal aspect of it. The minute you lose that, it opens up a different door. And that different door is the content, is the focus. It's no longer the person. And so people will still
Right.
key in on the voice, but it's not. And that's the thing, man. How many people? You got to think as you build your channel. You got to go multiple ways. Am I looking to build subscribers, or am I just making something that's going to be entertaining? If I'm going to be making something that's entertaining, well, gosh, now I got to start thinking about. I've got two different kinds of listeners. Well, I've got listeners, and I've got listeners and viewers. And the listeners and viewers are going to want some kind of image association, right?
Right.
Versus just a listener who only is listening to it like it is a standard radio program. And so that's how do you balance that? Because let's say I'm doing a gutter and I'm talking about a comic book. Well, the minute I put up a page and I start discussing a page, I've just lost all of my listeners.
Mm-hmm.
because a listener's not going to, they have no bearing for what I'm talking about because I'm referencing something that's ethereal. I can describe it, but that's not as good as being able to see it. So now I'm
Right.
overly engaging my visual. So you've got to balance that, but you've got to find that magic point of where it works, or you just go hard onto one side of it or the other.
Well, and you'll notice, I've seen it before where like Joe Rogan has obviously been raked over the coals for that exact thing for the listeners, from the listeners, and you'll hear him every now and again. He'll say, "Okay, so just for the listeners out there," he said, what's happening is the, he's showing me this thing, and it's a really weird, like if you were listening to the story, it breaks you out of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, for sure.
And I do find that to be distracting when he does it. And so yeah, I think you're right. You kind of have to, but I suppose there's a learning curve there.
Right. And that's why, like, even with like my shadow, when I do the radio program, I've got there's no video, there's no, I can't add a video element to it. So what do? Well, I just put up a static picture of the actor, and it's the voice actor. So now you've got a visual representation of it. But then when I'm doing my intro and I'm talking about the history of the radio program, I'm going to show you matchbooks that had the shadow on it. I'm going to show you art of the shadow. It's anything I can to associate with that. And then as I reference actors, I'll show pictures of the actor in my voiceover. So there's that audio video. But then once that intro ends, it's just the audio because in my case, I want you to experience the radio program just like they experienced when it first aired in 38. I want you to have that moment where you're just going to sit back and just close your eyes and listen to it because that's how it should be listened to. It's
Right.
true radio. But when you're building your own content, it's different because now you have options. So how do you associate those two? And like Feral Historian, like I was mentioning, he's just a dude, man. And he just records himself on a selfie stick out in the middle of the wilderness talking. And he'll throw some, clips up occasionally to give a little bit of variety, but it's mostly just him walking around in like a milsurp jacket talking. And there's something about that that's engaging too, because again, that's the human element. Now I'm not just seeing you, I'm seeing you just walk and talk, which is like we're having a conversation.
Yes. Yeah, there's so many different ways to do it. And that's where I think
I'm
it
not acknowledging that, JP. That's my
that's where
co-host.
JP, what's going on? We've talked. So yeah, that's where there's so many different ways you can do it. I think that's why I just decided to jump in, and thankfully you said, "Hey, I'll be a life jacket for you." And I
Yeah,
think
man.
that
One thing I've got no problems. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I love talking about sociological, philosophical concepts. And I think those are multi-layered within streaming, especially the sociology of it. I'm absolutely amazed by the larger streamers and how they're able to cultivate an audience and then maintain that audience. Because I think that's absolutely fascinating. It's an aspect of human nature that is different than what radio always used to be or than what TV used to be. There's a lot of Jerry Springers, there's a there's
yes,
a there's a lot of Maury Povich, and there's a lot of Cheryl Atkinses out there that are doing hard-hitting stuff that is really deep and newsworthy and great, well researched and journalistic. And so I don't think Elon and Joe Rogan are wrong when they're talking about how this is the new frontier of journalism. I also don't think it's wrong when you say this is absolutely the lowest form of entertainment that humanity has ever formulated. So how can one be the same as the other? Well, dude, it's been the same for every media content that has ever been produced, right? And
yes,
there's the false dichotomy that the only reason VHS succeeded over Betamax was because even though Betamax was the superior format, same thing with DVDs versus Blu-rays versus HD DVD. The only reason the one format succeeded over the other is because which direction the porn industry went. And
absolutely right.
to a large degree, man, why is this so big? Well, it's because porn grabbed a hold of it and they own it. And it's to our
Yes,
detriment and it's to our benefit. And to me, it's mostly detriment, but the benefit there is it's ubiquitous and it's all out there.
Well, and then there's so I will watch 6 hours of content to determine whether or not I should go see this new movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 hours long.
Yes. No, there's a lot of that too, that where people are consuming the media over a media product more than the actual media.
Right. And I've thought about that as far as yes, that can kill like your entertainment, but also like you said, how we're consuming the news, we're consuming it from aggregators.
Yes.
So what happens when the people who make the news stop making it? There's nothing to aggregate.
Well, there is no news. News is news.
Well, that's true. There is no journalism.
Right. The entire concept of news is not actually news. News is marketing. It's journalism. But journalism isn't even true journalism. It's everybody has an agenda. And
Right.
it's what, that goes back to Remember the Maine, if not before then. So to a large degree, it's all propaganda if you look at it through the right lens and you understand what you're reading and what you're watching and what you're listening, because everybody has their agenda. And I'm a firm believer in that, but at the same time, I'm going to tell you I have no agenda. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
nobody's going to admit they have an agenda. But
there's nothing that's 100%.
Well, I'm an individualist, right? I subscribe to the philosophies of Ayn Rand, not entirely 100%, but very strongly. So I'm always going to present everything I can from an angle of an individualist. Well, somebody that's not an individualist, that thinks that, it's the collective that's more important, is going to present something the total opposite way. And so now who's right? Well, I am, clearly, because, I'm talking about the individual. And that's how I'm presenting it from. But it gets broken and it gets fractured. And you really have to be mindful of who you're listening to, what's their motivations. And then the other thing, man, let's say I come out and I say, hey, don't take this vitamin, take that vitamin. And here's all the reasons why. Well, you don't know. There's a checkbox on a YouTube video that you have to check. And you say, this was for kids or it's not for kids. And then the next one says, is there a paid advertisement in this? I can lie. I'm under no legal obligation to say, yeah, there's no paid advertisement. That was just my suggestion. But earlier today, I accepted an envelope full of a couple $100 bills from this company, and I'm just going to mention their product.
Right.
Or I could be shilling my own product.
Yes, I've been really struggling this week trying to figure out what I could sell.
Right? That's your first instinct.
I need to monetize this.
See, and that's it. I do have a Patreon for the gutter because I subscribe to the premium version of StreamYard. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it. If you want to help me out, feel free. And I've got a couple of people that give me like a couple bucks and it helps out, but it's certainly not something that, like, they're all friends of mine. So it doesn't really feel, if it was a total stranger that I had no bearing, like I hadn't known at all, I'd feel weird about it. But because it's a bunch of friends of mine, it's like, yeah, they're helping, they enjoy the show and they're helping me out so I can keep on doing it.
But then sometimes, when I'm watching people just rolling in the super chats, and I think how incredibly insane that is. But then I think, man, these guys provide me like 10 hours a week. I'm listening to them for free.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So that's,
well, I'll tell you the other side
worth
of that,
something.
though. I recently watched, I didn't watch, I heard the clip of a guy. It was two people, and one of them says that they swear they've been friends for like 15 years, like great friends in the industry they're in. And the one guy, he came out and he said some stuff. I go, hey, man, I disagree with some of the stuff you're doing. And so there was like a cope stream, and he was bragging afterwards, like, oh, I made $850 tonight. Like, dude, you threw your friend underneath the fucking bus for $850 once. How long are you going to drag your friend and make money off them? Like, that's so weird that would happen. Like, would you do that in real life? Like, would you meet a buddy and start disagreeing with them and then have like turn to the people next to you at a bar and go like, if you pay me $5, I'm just going to keep on dragging my boy over here. It's just weird. It's stuff you would never do in public.
Right.
Or think about that. Like, you're on a soapbox and you're ranting about somebody and somebody walks up and says, hey, for $5, say this. Oh, okay. Like, the minute you put it into a context where it's a different situation, it becomes absurd.
Yes. No, it is. I remember the very first time that I asked my son what he was doing, and he said, I'm watching somebody play games. And I said, what now?
Right.
And
well, okay. How different is that than I'm going to sit down and watch my Lions play on Sunday during NFL season?
Right. You're absolutely right.
I could go outside and knock on my neighbor's door and go, hey, dude, you want to throw a football around?
There's now if I just need some kind of background noise, I will occasionally throw on somebody playing a game that I don't even know what the game is or what they're doing, but it's background white noise to me, and it's 5 hours long, so I don't have to, pull my phone out to change it.
Right. No, for sure. But I don't think there's any difference in the entertainment quality between people watching people game. And I think it's a misrepresentation that there's some kind of difference there than watching a major league sporting event. Like, there is no difference.
No, you're absolutely right.
Other than one is massively tax subsidized than the other.
It's just when you first see it, when a new thing first happens, you're like, what now? Like, it doesn't make sense. But like you said, over time, you put it in context, and yeah, we watch dudes drive in circles for hours on end.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's when you start thinking about how much time have you wasted. And dude, I love sports. I love watching the last 5 minutes of every Lions game because that's when they're going to win or lose it, because that's how bad they were for years. It's only been in the last few years that it's been kind of exciting and they're winning games. But I love hockey. I love watching hockey, and Lollipop Gang unboxing videos still don't make sense. So there are multiple, like, people preparing food. I think is absolutely fantastic, because that's a video that I can put on in my kitchen while I'm matching them and see if it turns out the same way it turned out for them. I'm good with cooking video. I don't understand people eating videos at all. I don't get that. I don't get the unboxing videos. Like, let me show you how this was packaged. Unless there's an entire subset of packaging engineers that watch a ton of YouTube so that they can learn how to do their jobs better, I don't understand unpacking videos.
No, and they'll do it in an ASMR way too.
Oh, where they're crinkling everything and
well, they're like, ooh, this is a really good box, I mean, for me, I look at a box like, oh man, I can store nuts and bolts in this. This is a really good box, But my kids are like, ooh, listen to that sound it makes when you open it for the first and last time ever, because I'm going to take this thing out and throw this box away.
Right now, I will say there is one unboxing video that is absolutely fantastic, and that is our good friend Nefarious did a graphic novel called Mavericks about robots in the future, and it was like a military book, really good. It was a lot of fun. But our buddy JP, who's in the chat, Raiden Radio, did an unboxing video of that, and Neff sent out so many extras that he's acting. His entire video is like he's in the Civil War. And he's writing letters home to his wife. And he's like, I just got through the first part of the box. I should be home in, a month. And he's like, dearest Polly, it's been 3 months since my last letter. I apologize. I'm still unpacking the box. And it was both a beautiful takedown and a nice sardonic look at the unboxing scene. And that's why I love JP, man. He always takes something from a fresh look and gives it a little bit of spice that has a little bit of a biting edge.
But the untold number of millionaires that have been created because of these things that don't make sense to us.
But that's anything, man.
Right.
There's watch Shark Tank any given weekend, but don't watch the new ones. Go on like ABC and watch some of the ones from like 8 years ago, and watch some of the stuff that's been pitched, and then find out how much their companies are valued today. Now, some absolutely failed, because there's always going to be failure in everything. Failure is important, because as Dylan said, there's no success with failure, but failure is no success at all. But man, the number of successes and what they're valued at for stupid things like a sponge to clean your pans that has a smiley face on it so you can wash your spoons in the smile portion. It's just dumb. But god damn it, that guy's worth like 400 million. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, my son, when he was younger, he would watch all of these life hack videos. And it was one of those things where it got so annoying because, Dad, you're peeling that banana wrong. And I'm like, no, motherfucker, stop watching the internet, because they're doing everything wrong.
No, for sure. There's a lot of that where you get people just doing dumb stuff just for the sake of views, for sure.
Well, I think that's, truth be told, that's a problem, and that's going to become a bigger problem in the future. And where I see it the most is recipes. Because if you've spent a decade building an audience and doing recipes, you constantly have to do something new. And that's where you start getting these recipes and you're like, who the fuck put mint in green beans? This doesn't make any sense. And you're like, oh, they ran out of ideas.
Right. Well, even on that, the celebrity chefs, a lot of the celebrity chefs have, and I didn't know this until I got to know JP a little bit, because he loves cooking. And there's like counterpoint videos where like you'll watch, who does I'm going to save your rest, Gordon Ramsay. Is like Gordon Ramsay will do a video on scrambled eggs, and then it's like some cook that made Gordon Ramsay cry that he tutored under, like, does another video and says like and it's just like the smallest subcontext of like, you're an idiot if you can't keep your water at the same temperature while you're boiling an egg. And Gordon Ramsay says you want to, move it on and off the burner so you keep your water at the same temperature. It's just little things like that are laid throughout the videos that it's like, oh my god, like, they're cooking a fucking poached egg or a scrambled egg, and they're being fucking catty to each other. It's just so petty. It's amazing.
Yes. Well, and Gordon Ramsay, he really captured the market on making it entertaining.
But again, he's an asshole, right? That's
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing he hasn't done that we haven't watched 3-4 times in the background, because somebody in the house is like playing Gordon Ramsay, staying at hotels. Doesn't make any sense, but he's going to go to a hotel and be an asshole to somebody, so we should watch it.
Well, and Sour Skittles in the chat says there should be some free full episodes on YouTube, especially the old ones. There are tons of shows that are available on YouTube. One of my favorites that was just brought to my attention by one of my friends that watches The Gutter, Charles Bronson starred in one television series in his entire career, and it was 2 seasons. It was a show called Man with a Camera. I highly recommend it. All of the episodes are available on YouTube. One of the greatest sci-fi shows from the late 90s, early 2000s, Total Recall 2047. All the episodes for that are on YouTube. If you go to the Internet Archive, there's even more shows that are on Internet Archive. There's tons of material out there. Like I said, and this is the awesome part of the internet. I'm a Doctor Who fan. So there are a lot of episodes of Doctor Who that aired back in the days of the first and the second and the third Doctor that are gone, that we don't have anymore, because they were aired and the tapes were overwritten. Now, with the way that media works, that will never happen, because somebody somewhere is going to download it and upload it to a Mirror or a pirate site or the Internet Archive. And once it's online, it's there forever.
Right. Yeah. It was amazing to find out that the BBC has always sucked. That was my take on that.
I love the old Doctor Who's, man. You can't go wrong with those.
No, you can't, and that's four more hours of conversation there.
I tell you, if you want to talk Doctor Who, though, as much of a fan as I am, JP is the man to get. He is a much more studious and educated Doctor Who fanatic than I am.
Yes, I know we had a good conversation about that, and we'll have to have another conversation about that in the future.
For sure. Yeah,
Yes,
BBC had 10 actors. Yeah,
yes,
they tended to cycle through them for sure.
they do. Every hit show they have is they just rotate them. They just rotate them. Well, Aldous, this has been super awesome, and I cannot thank you enough for being my very first guest. This has been amazing.
No, absolutely, man. I'm honored. Happy to come in. Always happy to talk. And topics like this are fun because there is no right or wrong answer. It's not like we're going to get mad at each other. We're just expressing our opinions, and that's the coolest part of this. We can just hop on and have a nice chat and get some people from the chat involved. And man, everybody's bringing something to the table. The chat brought up some great stuff, and hopefully they'll go check out some of the stuff I mentioned, some of the stuff you mentioned, and man, everybody's better for it.
Oh, absolutely. So my next problem, before we go, my next problem is how do I get somebody for next week?
Well, you ask. It's pretty simple, right? You go out and you find like you could have Snuggie on. You could talk about nothing other than the comic of Power Pack because he's a huge fan.
What else could I do? I kid.
But no, what are you interested in, man? Let me ask you this: what's your absolute favorite television show ever?
Oh, well, I mean, it would be Doctor Who.
Well, there you go. You could talk Doctor Who. What's your favorite movie ever?
Ooh, that's that.
Well, I'll tell you this.
That's an episode right there. Is
Right.
trying to figure out which autistic mood I would have to be in for one to be my favorite over the other, and it will never ever be the Gilmore Girls.
Well, then there's the discussion of what's your favorite movie, right? So I could talk to you for hours about my favorite television shows or my favorite movies. But if you start talking about, well, what's your favorite individual scene in a movie? And this came up this week. My favorite individual scene in any film ever is Humphrey Bogart, The Big Sleep. And he's watching a bookstore, right? And it's almost out of nowhere. And it starts to rain, and so he steps in a bookstore that's across the street from the other bookstore, and he starts talking to the girl that's there, played by the absolutely stunning Dorothy Malone. And there is this beautiful subcontext that goes, it starts real slow in their conversation, and then it builds, and it's all sexual innuendo, but it's in the 40s, so it's not explicit. So you have to listen to the dialogue and how the lines are delivered, and it's only like 6 minutes long, but it's absolutely fantastic acting. And she's absolutely stunning and plays like the minute she takes her glasses off, it's fantastic. It ratchets it up on the sultry scale and goes to the level that, and you just don't see films do that anymore.
Now, wow, that's a whole different conversation that turns into a negative thing about things you don't see in film anymore.
No, for sure. And then you can talk about pre-Hays Code and what did they get away with in the 30s? Like people think like, oh, the 70s got pretty risque. Oh, not at all. Go back and look at some of the stuff from 29, 30, 31, especially some of the stuff that was coming out of France and Germany. And it's wild on what they were allowing on the screen. And this is before rating systems. The MPAA doesn't exist. Hell, look at like what used to be a PG movie. The lady that played Juliet in the famous Romeo and Juliet movie just died. She shows her assets in a PG movie that we all watched in high school. So
yeah, that's different times.
Yeah, Dale A says they actually in the novel, yes, indeed, Marlowe is pretending to be gay because he does in the I think it's is it the 78 or the 79 remake of it? They do that scene where he's suggesting that he's looking for illicit pornography in the bookstore when he's in the bookstore that he's monitoring, and they don't do the secondary sub scene that they did in the Bogart version, which is not nearly that version's. I don't recommend the later version, but I think we're going off the rails a little bit here.
We are. And Aldous, tell them what you're doing. What you got coming up?
This Friday on the Gutter, we'll be covering the Golden Age. The Golden Age is I'm not going to say it's a response to Watchmen, which is probably one of the more famous books, but in a lot of ways it carries a lot of similarities. It's written by James Robinson, drawn by Paul Smith, colored by Richard Orey. It's a fantastic 4-book series from the early 90s, and it really clashes with what you'd expect to come out of the 90s with its style and format, but it is deeply rooted in a loose response, in my opinion, to Watchmen. So I think it's a good book to discuss, and I'm looking forward to seeing what JP has to say about it.
And I literally just found out today that you have the Wednesday show.
Yeah. The Wednesday show, creatively entitled The Show, is just more of a variety show. JP and I go through just a bunch of topics. I annoy him with whatever historical event that particular day's anniversary is. And then we go through kind of what we're reading, what we're watching on TV, and what shows we're looking at. And then we just go through a couple of news headlines, and then we watch. Right now, we're on the last 2 episodes of the 1943 Batman serial, which was the first time Batman was ever put to celluloid. And as the chat affectionately refers to it as racist Batman, because the villain is a Irish actor that's playing a Japanese mad scientist that is looking for radium for his radium gun, while also turning mobsters into zombies. It is something incredibly special and greatly of its time.
Yes, absolutely. And I grew up watching those. So yes, when I found the Wednesday show, I was pleasantly surprised. And I said, yeah, no, I'm into this. Well, and as far as this channel, same time next week, I'll be back with somebody.
Sounds good, man.
Thanks for everybody in the chat. And Aldous, thank you. Bye.